I'm Marina McIsaac, and I've been at Arizona State University since 1980. I got my doctorate at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and my career was highly influenced by Anne Devaney, who was my mentor and my major professor. And she was the one who originally took us all to AECT and encouraged us all to come and become a part of the professional organization. And she emphasized the importance of it to us. So many of us are still AECT members. Even though we've retired, I retired from ASU in 2001 to continue some international work that I've been doing, and became more interested in doing that, and it was time for me to retire from ASU, so I was happy to do that. But I think that the importance that Anne brought to our professional obligations was to become members of AECT and then to utilize that network in our careers, and that was very important to me. Then subsequently, when I got a job at ASU, Arizona State University, I did the same thing with my students. And now I'm pleased to see that many of us are members of the International Division, and my work detoured into distance education as a subset of educational technology in 1988 or 1987 as a result of a Fulbright that I had to Turkey. But during that period of having my own doctoral students, and then as a result of the international work that I did, coming back and then having students that we brought over to ASU from Turkey, from Portugal, from other countries, as a result of the work I was doing there, now they are bringing their students to AECT. And so I'm now seeing, which is a wonderful thing, 3 generations of students. And that's very nice, because all of these students now have become very, very international, and although they belong to other divisions, I think that they would say that their home is in the international division. So AECT has been very important. Not only, I think mentoring was probably the most important part, because it directed me to be a part of AECT, and then through me, many other students. And I think that that's really been great. As to career, AECT stayed an important part of my career, but I think that one's career is never what one plans. And as I said, I became very interested in distance education as a result, just by chance, of a Fulbright that I had to Turkey, and there worked with Anadolu University, which was just beginning their sort of ascent to be a mega university in terms of distance learning. They now have over 1 million students registered and involved throughout the country. It's a very large country. And through that work and encouraging participation at AECT, they came over and participated. And then through work that I've done in other countries as a result of that, the AECT connection is strong.
Okay. Can you cite some folks, you mentioned Anne Devaney, can you cite other folks in the AECT that have influenced the way you think about our work?
Well, I think, of course, that the whole organization, since I first joined, which was probably in about 1976 or so, there have been a lot of shifts. When I first came to AECT, I think there were certain emphases that have changed over time. I mean, I think it helped to direct what I thought was important to learn and to study, although I sort of went off in a bit of a different direction, becoming a little more international before we were really international. I mean, I think the international division, and I think that's why I felt that it was so important to be a part of the international division, because although we said we were international, we really weren't in the early days. And now we are more. So I think that I've been influenced by, of course, the leadership and by people particularly in research and theory in RTD, because I was involved in that division for a long time, was president of that some long time years ago, and that helped to sort of form my professional direction. In terms of I think AECT has two parts for me: the professional part, which is maybe the content, and then the socializing part, which is also the networking. And I think both of those things were important. In terms of specific people, it would be all my colleagues. I mean, I would say from the international division people, Dick Cornell, Michael Streibel at University of Wisconsin. It would be hard for me to come up with a long list of them, but I would say almost everyone who's been active in AECT has influenced me in one way or another.
You've had the chance to talk to your individual students and some of the students who are students of your students about AECT and why one should get involved with it. Assuming you put this on the web and assuming somebody surfs to the spot where they find you, what would you tell prospective or new AECT members about the value of your association?
Well, I think that probably the networking is one of the most important parts of it. And I was thinking as you were asking the question, I flashed back to who were some of the important people that influenced me early on. And I would say Frank Dwyer, for one. I was terrified of him. As a doctoral student, I came and I remember the first presentation I gave, and in those days maybe people took themselves more seriously, or I, as a graduate student, thought everybody else was so impressive that I was afraid to say anything. And I remember that those of us, Alan Shute was one from many years ago, Randy Ketting, Michael Streibel, and Rhonda Robinson, who are, she and Michael are still very involved. And we would come and look at what was expected. And I remember, I think Frank did this just out of pure joy of torturing doctoral students. And he sat in the back of the room, and I remember presenting at my first conference and thinking, I hope he doesn't ask me anything. And sure enough, he did. And I just blanched. I was so terrified. And it was one of those kind of questions that you ask when you want to unnerve people. I don't even remember what it was directly, but that certainly convinced me that this was a serious organization. So he influenced me a lot. Bill Wynn in those days, who was a wonderful, who had done a lot of work in educational technology from SC, and he was very influential. Then he ended up in Washington. So to go back to that, that occurred to me because I hadn't thought of it before. But what do I think for students and people that I bring in, especially now? I think particularly about Hakan Aydin and Hasan Çalışkan, and the two from Turkey who brought their students here. Now they have about 8 students that they brought from Turkey this year. So what would we say is important? Well, I think right now the international connections are very important. They wouldn't have been years ago. In addition, of course, the basic research and theory, the basic instructional design concepts that we've been carrying forward for years, I think are very foundational to people coming into this field. So I would say to them that they can meet the people here that they read about. That's something very important. They can have discussions with them. They can ask them questions. They can disagree with them. They can have very good intellectual exchanges. In addition, of course, with the networking connections, which are so important to people who come from overseas.
You've said so much good stuff. I don't know where to go other than, are there things that you think that should be in here for the editor to have a look at and think if it fits in with the general theme of history making in AECT context?
No, I think that pretty well covers what I can think of in terms of my relationship with AECT. I mean, I think that I've been in it long enough. I've seen a lot of changes, and I think they're for the good. I really like to see what AECT has become over the years through hardships and through determination of staying an important organization for the field, and still the most important. Much of my work has been with ISOM in the last 5 years, or more than that, maybe 10 years, because of my international interests. And I was really pleased that AECT has always been the organization that represents the United States to the outside world in educational technology, and I think that's really important. And I'm glad to see that we continue to do that. And now we've become much more international than we ever were before. And I think that's continuing, and that'll be a strength for us. The first person that I met when I came to AECT was Laverne Miller. And I think the first one I came to was in Des Moines, or it was someplace in Iowa, and I was at Wisconsin at the time, and I drove over, and it was also a joint IVLA meeting, so IVLA came right after it. And I remember going to IVLA and meeting Laverne Miller, and I saw her then as a real, she knew everybody, and she introduced me to everybody. So she and Lyda Cochran was the other one who was, very important. But I wasn't sure whether they were more important in IVLA, because I then became very involved with IVLA and in the things that they were doing. And so anyway, but all of those people, and I think and Jim Soucy and Robert Spraden and all those people, Mike Moore, were very important, and they crossed over between AECT and IVLA, and which ones were more in which one, I don't know. But I consider the whole group of them part of my professional development. And then you were asking about research. And I think that research, for me, came along as being very important as a result of my interests. And my interests were in online teaching, because I had worked in Turkey helping to establish the EARN node that was in Izmir, and it was the first year that internet, or BitNet in those days, was coming to Turkey. And then I worked because I thought it was really important for people to have online access in the social sciences. So my research took that turn. I thought, well, what can we do to make this more of a teaching tool? And so I began to look at the social aspects of it, with especially the doctoral students that I had at that time in the, what would they be, 90s, I guess, late 80s and 90s. And so we started teaching online and used First Class as our first platform, and because Blackboard didn't work for us, and a lot of other things. But looking at the interactions between teachers and students, and between students and students, and just trying to examine what went on online. So that was the research that interested me the most, and that was also the research that interested my students. And I would say that she too has really carried that on a lot. So has Pambos Rasidas, who is working over in Cyprus. But many of them have taken different aspects of what they look at as a social impact, and now cultural, even more. Social and cultural impact of the interactions on how people learn online.
Okay. Anything else you want to
No,
think about?
I think that's it. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you. It's great.